Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we tackle all the tough issues. Well, actually, they're not really so tough. We tend to make them more tough on ourselves than they are. But we talk about what it takes to improve the customer experience at your store. And the better we all get, the better the customer experience. It's not rocket science. It's something that's been the same since the beginning of time, yet we keep reinventing the wheel and making it as though it's something new. And you guys know I am a big fan of technology and leveraging technology and data to make better decisions and to streamline what we do to become more efficient, more profitable, while at the same time improving the customer experience. So when I met this guy named Brett Morris with Perception Predict, and I heard about his software, I said, wow, that's a guy I've got to have on my show because that's like tomorrow's stuff today. So cool. So Brett Morris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here. Good to be talking with you today and tonight. It's today, mornings other places in the world, but evening on the East Coast of the US.
Now, I just want to give everybody a disclaimer up front. There are some Wi-Fi issues, so if there's a slight bit of buffering going on, we've done everything we can to try to alleviate that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So just let you know that up front. Now, Brett, before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you got to this point where you are?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. You can maybe pick up from that deep southern accent that I'm actually an Aussie Kiwi, born in New Zealand, did an undergrad major there, went to Australia. Actually, similar to Russell Crowe, but actually where the comparison stops, he got into a lot of movies, including The Gladiator, and no comparison. So ended up in Australia where I worked a good deal of my working career and did a lot of work around Salesforce optimization, working with companies of all different sizes across pretty much, had the privilege of working across so many different industry verticals, automotive, B2B, technology, and just finance and healthcare and so on. Large companies, small companies, and in all of them, without exception, they always had issues with turnover of salespeople. And so we worked with them at various times over a long period of time, and that was sort of became the genesis for Perception. So and we eventually, having sort of got that business started 7 years ago, where we really went about trying to tackle this really entrenched turnover issue that every company has around hiring and retaining the right salespeople. Did a lot of research and study around it, which we maybe get to share with you tonight, and figure out, what was it, what did we discover, what was the underlying cause of that turnover, how we went about really building a solution to really attack that cause and solve the problem, and as a result of the success of that, we moved the company, the head office, to Atlanta, and that was 3 or 4 years ago.
Wow. Now, let me just acknowledge a couple of folks and then paint the picture. We have first one chiming in is Ed Chipolowski. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ed. Ed has been an awesome friend and supporter. Thank you very much for all you do, Ed. Russell B. Hill, one of my SDL brothers, says hello and good evening, everyone. And we have Kurt Van Anen from Mañana No Mas. Follow him on LinkedIn if you don't already. Thanks for the invite, Paul Meijer. Jared Kalfas with Black Book. Hi, Jared, says good evening. And also from Black Book, Paul Machine, Ola Friends, and Robert Allen Carvel. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SNL. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right, I'm going to paint the picture. This software is some killer stuff, which Brett's going to get into. But just think about this for a moment. When you have a sales force, and let's face it, we all sell. Whether it's a service advisor at the desk, whether it's a clerk in a store, whether it's a road warrior, the big corporation that hires salespeople to go out on the road and represent them and sell their stuff. These companies spend a lot of money. First of all, you've got to attract talent, So typically they go to Indeed or some of these other sites. That costs them a good chunk of money. Then you go through the process of so many applications. Today, everything's online or on the computer. There's probably hundreds of people applying for the same job. And although there's software to kind of filter some of that stuff out, it's still an arduous task to go through all the people. Now, let's say you find a candidate that on paper looks good, verbally sounds good, and you hire that person and you spend the money to either move them to the new location. You spend money on onboarding, the whole team for that. You spend money on training to get them to kind of know your culture and your company. You put them in a company car, that costs a good chunk of money. And today you're not going to get a salesperson cheap. It starts, I believe, at about $85,000, plus the car, plus the benefits, plus the bonuses, plus the commissions. And guess what? These people live on the road. So that means that Monday through Friday, they're staying in a hotel. They're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's all on the company dime. When you think about it and you add up the money, you're looking at $150,000 minimum per rep. And the company has no guarantee, zero guarantee that that rep is going to do anything. Typically, they'll hold them out there for 6 months or 7 months, 8 maybe, before they bounce them, only to start the process all over again. That's crazy. But if you had a way where you can predict everything, now you can make the right decision and cut some of the potential losses you would have had. I got Jonathan Wistman. Thanks for hosting. Thank you for joining in. And Paul Machine says thousands of people applying for the same job and choosing one is a bear. So along comes perception predict. So tell us a little bit about how this kind of stuff works, because it seems kind of James Bond for some of the people out here that aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, and it sounds like magic, but it's not. And it's really it's using technologies and bits of science like talent science and data science that have been around. There's 100 years of reliable and predictive talent science that really in that time has provided us with a very rich tapestry of what it is about us as humans that makes us human. What makes us is various intelligences and various emotional intelligence and various parts of our psychological DNA, if you will. Sounds complex, and there's a lot of bright people have been working for a long time in a lot of social science settings around the world to uncover some very interesting aspects of what makes us who we are. And then on the other side, you got 300 years of data science, and this is math, right? A bit more than 2 and 2 equals 4, but it's still math, it's statistics. And when you start understanding people and putting together with using data science how those people perform on the job, you start to realize that you can actually start to predict how someone will perform before you actually hire them. If you're hiring someone to sell vehicles or sell a certain amount of revenue, you can predict how much revenue or how many vehicles they'll be able to sell before you actually hire them once you do the work. And as we started to work on this and started to engineer this 7 years ago, really initially with the idea of being able to understand what was it that made people turn over so quickly, and businesses outside of, say, retail automotive, 30, 40, 50% turnover of salespeople is the norm. In automotive, 40, 50, up to 70% of turnover of sales hires. And the question for us became why. So we started to do some very forensic digging into, what made people join, and then 3, 6, 9 months later they're gone. How come? Is it because the culture sucks in the place that they joined? Are the managers doing a lousy job? Are the hygiene factors bad? Are we not paying these people enough? Are we not training them well enough? Are we not onboarding them enough? And it turns out that all of those have an influence, but it's actually quite a minor influence. And there's a single reason that is 80, 90% of the reason that stands head and shoulders above all of that. And And that reason is that we end up putting the wrong person into the job. We see people, we like them, we see them, they present well, and sometimes we decide not to hire someone who doesn't present well. And very often that individual who doesn't come across well in an interview, virtual or otherwise, is often the better hire, who's actually going to perform well on the job. But how would we know? We've got no particular intelligence or insight. So as we started to realize that 80 to 90% of the reason as to why someone falls, just doesn't perform for us after 3, 6, 9 months, and we realized that we were putting the wrong people into the job, we figured we had to try and work out what was it about individuals that made them right for the job. So that's when we started to bring in this talent and data science, putting it together. And it was at that time we also realized that the answers to most companies' problems actually lies within the data that they're already sitting on. And that started the journey of digging into client data, putting together in new and unique ways, and then predicting how a salesperson would perform. And beyond that, also being able to predict how long they'd stick around. So not just how will they perform, but once you got them, are they going to stick around 6 months, 18 months, 2 years? Because you can, if you've got the data, and most companies have got the data, you can figure out a lot of things that using that data. How will they perform? Will they stick around? And so on.
Want to get to a couple of comments. Jared Kalfa says, correct, Paul, doesn't include if the employer puts a rep on a guarantee for a certain period of time. That's right. I didn't take that into account either, but that is definitely something that happens because a lot of times a rep won't come unless you guarantee them a certain dollar amount for a certain period of time for a ramp up time. And Robert Allen Carvel, a good consultant is worth the money spent. Results pay off. A relationship with the owner partner is must. Now, in building out this software, it sounds very complex. Is it a question of looking at the current team and then dissecting, if you will, their performance and then tying it to certain metrics, what they do, how they do, what their thought process is in doing the things they do? Is that kind of how this software is built before it's unleashed on the people?
Yeah, kind of, Paul. Exactly. Companies' data really is it's a collection of history. It tells us about the individuals that we've got in the team and how they perform. And if we also get input from the individual team members, we're able to see what is the makeup of these individuals, what's their DNA, what drives them or holds them back. And when you put that together and you get into the performance data of a particular sales team. So let's say, for example, we took 400 sales consultants in a highline brand and paired that with 2 years of month by month unit sales, vehicle sales numbers. And you put that together with the right technology. And yes, it's complex, but we hide most of that complexity from clients because they got a day job. What they really want to know is if I hire this guy, individual, this man, this woman, and I put them on the job, can they do the job? Can they perform? If I'm hiring them and I expect them to sell 10, 12, 14 units a month, is that what they're going to do? Or are they going to end up doing 6 or 8? Or could they potentially do 25 or 30? And the answer is, well, unless you've got some data and intelligence that you're applying to the sort of the intuition and experience that you're bringing to decisions around people today, then there's a bit of guesswork that goes into it. And that's one of the reasons why it's very difficult without the applying good data and intelligence to figure out how will someone perform before I hire them. So that was the secret. That was the nut that we cracked. And we've been applying this now for 3-4 years and getting extremely accurate results with the clients that we work with around the globe.
Got a couple of comments. AJ Holst, good evening all. Good evening, AJ. I think I saw him this morning on our SDL call. And Paul Machine says automotive is closer to 85% turnover across all dealerships. Some dealerships have 150% turnover. They use horrible hiring and training companies that charge a new hire for training to work at a dealer with a promise of reimbursement if, and if is a really big word for only 2 letters, one meets an outsized goal that in the last 3 years no hire has hit. Data can avoid those mistakes and destroy a dealership's reputation. Or those mistakes, that destroy a dealership's reputation. Kurt Van Anen, company culture is so important. Sometimes the biggest rock star in raw talent can be the worst addition to the team. Like a cancer. Sure, the person can sell really well, but if they take out the rest of the team, it's just a question of time before everything goes down the tubes. And Michael Dean Offmuth, Elite FI guy, says, good evening. Welcome, Michael. And Kurt says, it's got to be a great fit. Talent, personality, onboarding. If that sucks, their future sucks. And Marty Martin, good evening from Australia. Perception Predict is a brilliant system. Hi, Brett. Hi, Paul. Welcome to the show, Marty.
Hey, Marty.
How long did it take to develop the software? Because I'm really intrigued by this, because I'm thinking yes, you look at numbers and you look at performance, but you've got to dig into somebody's mind to kind of map out the traits in order to come up with the questions to ask the next person.
Yeah, exactly. So specifically to your question, it took 3 years and $2.5 million between myself and my co-founder partner, who's a talent and data scientist, putting our heads together and really doing all of the background scientific research and engineering work to develop the technology to be able to measure over 450 different individual research validated traits. And we take that inventory that we develop, and then we look at a particular job role. And we started with sales, but we've now extended that, particularly in automotive, to really every job role. So we look at technicians and service writers and F&I people and so on. So we started with sales because that was the easier one to start with.
Yeah.
And started to nail that. So initially about 3 years, Paul, built the platform, built the science, built an inventory, a very rich inventory. And one of the issues that we were trying to really develop and overcome was that historically, worldwide, the world's awash with sort of cookie cutter generic assessments and things like that, where
Yes.
it gets to measure 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 or even 20 different things, but they go in with a fixed formula that says, hey, we're going to measure these things, and because we know, and this is our formula, and it's going to tell you someone whether they're a good fit. What none of them can do, and today or historically, none of them were able to predict actual performance based on the KPIs of a job role. So if you're hiring someone for F&I and your PRU is $1,400, $1,800, whatever dollars a month, how will an F&I, whether you're promoting them internally or hiring them from externally, how will they perform in your business to your KPI standards and in your culture? Because you can take a good person, performs well in one situation, put them into another one, don't work. How come? What happened? Well, because all performance is contextual. You put them into a particular environment, some work well, some don't. And we figure that piece out as well. So it's a lot of work went into really understanding the depth that makes us up as humans, and it's messy. It's, as people, we're kind of messy. This is not a game of perfect. I wake up every day, look in the mirror and remind myself of that. So this is we're really trying to get at a piece that when you look particularly, for example, in automotive, every dealer has got systems to manage inventory and pricing and cash and lead gen and assets and a range of
often more than they even use.
And often don't really optimize those tools as much as they might. But what they lack is a formula and tools that built on their own data, and they've got the data that converts that data into intelligence and informs them about how to make better decisions, who to hire for this job role, who to promote, You're going to promote someone off the showroom floor into a sales manager role. Why take your best salesperson and turn them into your worst manager? Now, sometimes it might work out, and the stats are 1 in 8 times it does. But hey,
1 in 8 times is not an acceptable bet.
Well, why would you not want to give yourself the best chance you could?
Right. You know what I find it very interesting is that, so initially I thought it was just sales, but it's really performance. It's when you mention technicians, the person that's coming in, how many hours can that person turn? You know,
Yes.
what are they capable of? And then the other piece of it, where you talk about putting somebody in the right role, sometimes we get lucky at the store level and we realize that a particular person maybe isn't well cut out for the particular role that they had applied for or were even in. And we get lucky and we're able to place them in another part of the dealership and they thrive. But most of that happens by luck, not by science. And it seems to me that if you put everybody through through this software, then you could even, so it has even broader implications because you could look at what you currently have. You can do an assessment of your current store and see whether or not you've got the right people in place, or if there should be maybe some shifting within. Does that happen much? And
All the
before
time.
you answer that, let me just get to a couple of comments here. Let's see. We have Joseph Clementi, hashtag Coach Joe. This is exciting research and technology that brings together science and behavior statistics. Very cool, Brett Morris.
Thank
Robert
you.
Allen Carvel, KPIs, a great measurement tool for consultants' progress. 100%. And Paul Machine, so true, Kurt. How to insulate and groom that individual to perform while fitting into the culture. Sales is an individual performance-oriented profession, yet it depends on so many behind-the-curtain support personnel that a lone wolf high performer can alienate. It's up to the leadership to guide, groom, and gift relationships that are reciprocated to a lone wolf performer. A small percentage of lone wolf high performers will adapt to that guidance. Data can drill down to those that are willing. Man, this is killer stuff. And Robert Allen Carvel, Brett, how many dealers / companies you have using your software?
Yep, several hundred on the system, and because keep in mind this is we're right at the cutting edge. This is new. We've had it really running live for about two and a half years now, and maybe close to 3. And it takes a while for it to get some traction. And also, people ask us who our biggest competitor is, and frankly, it's the status quo. It's many dealers and managers saying, well, the way we do things now is good or good enough, and sometimes they're not really necessarily seeing or feeling the pain of those soft, hard, and opportunity costs that come with turning over people too quickly or putting the wrong person into the role. And as you were asking, Paul, is it possible to look at the complement of people that you've got in the store right now or across a group and say, do we have the best people in the right roles? And the answer is there's enormous room to improve that. And so when you create what we for a specific role, we call it a performance fingerprint. If you're looking for sales consultants, F&I, service writers, techs, and so on, you create a performance fingerprint for that particular role. Now, if you're hiring someone for a sales role, but they're ill-suited to that role, you can put them through the same process. Will also identify how will they go in a service role. Could be a porter role, could be a range of different roles, but you're then able to see what sort of role is this particular individual best suited to where they can achieve. So not only is this valuable for the employer in terms of being able to optimize the talent that they've got today and bring in the right talent into the right roles, but it's also great for the individuals, the candidates as well. I mean, do we think that they like coming in and rolling out 3, 6, 9 months later and feeling like failures? I don't think so. So this works well for both sides of the house, for the employer and for the candidate and for the employee.
Now, was this initially designed strictly as a hiring tool, or do I can't be the only one to think about this as to, kind of deploy it on an existing store to see whether or not everybody's in the right fit. What is there a percentage of stores that actually use it in that capacity to see if they should make changes, or is it primarily the new hire stuff?
We started off with the new hire piece as being the predominant, to be able to literally predict pre-hire how someone specifically performed. But we've now got it, and the answer to your question is actually very client specific. Depends on the client, depends on where their priorities are.
Yeah.
And so we predict pre-hire, optimize post-hire. So you can use exactly the same data and intelligence to optimize the workforce that you've got today. So it's not only about building the ideal workforce and having the right people in the right roles, but once you've got that workforce, also using the same intelligence to optimize it.
I would tend to think that if you better streamline, the employees with the roles they're better suited for, then you're right. Nobody wants to feel like a failure. That person will be happier. If the person is happier in their role, more successful, it's going to translate to the customer, because let's face it, you can walk into a store and tell within 5 minutes whether or not people are miserable or if they're truly happy with what they're doing. And if they're truly happy with what they're doing, I don't know about you, but I want to stay there and I want to spend my money there.
Yep, you can feel it. Feel it in a heartbeat. There's a vibe.
Let me get a couple of comments. Micah Weldon from the West Coast says on point. And Paul Machine's status quo equals BAU. Business as usual is the nemesis of growth. And Robert Allen Carvel, old school business practices don't work with today's businesses. Great that Brett's business is forward thinking on the future of the automotive world. But the cool thing is it's automotive, but it's really in every world.
Yeah. And to your point, Paul, it's the turnover is a fact of life. You're going to get a certain percentage of it because people's motivations change, their lives change, their relationships change, their circumstances change, and so they move. And people turn over because they succeed, because they fail, but also because they succeed. They move on and they get promoted and they get job offers and so on. So a certain amount you're going to expect. But that amount is not 50, 60, 70%. And so variety of clients we're working with, where, for instance, in B2B technology, where we do a lot of work, turnover of salespeople there is running 30 to 40%. And we will generally be able to reduce that down to 10 to 15%. You could argue you actually don't want it to go any lower than that. That's an acceptable level that a business can live with and accept that as a cost of business.
What's interesting is that I would, as far as a lot of companies go, right now in the dealer world, they don't think they need anybody because they're making record profits. There's more customers than product, and it doesn't really seem to matter as much from the conversations that I've been party to what they do, because the business is gonna come in anyway. But I think, as with anybody, the best time to fix your roof is when the sun is shining, right?
Right. Well, I guess anyone that's really sort of sitting back right now and saying, hey, we're making record profit must have a very short-term memory, because there are times when it's not necessarily been that way, when our margins have been extremely tight. And return on sales as a measure of profitability, it's been sub 2%. Sure, it's better now, but will that sustain itself forever into the future? Of course not.
Yeah, it was only about 3 years ago when those problems existed.
Yeah, but the broader environment changed, business conditions changed, and I think it's terrific that a lot of dealers are making some money, and hopefully they're going to be able to put that money that they are making to good use, and certainly in rewarding the shareholders, and being able to hire the people that they and employ the people that they do, but also to be able to invest in the business for the future.
So how do you typically approach a dealership?
With the conversation, obviously, and it's really about finding out what are the challenges they've got around the talent that they've got today, and just finding out, is it about and it's not, and we work across the world as well. So we're not just working in North America, even though I happen to be based in Sarasota, Florida. We're working with dealer groups in all across the world, and what's maybe not surprising, perhaps surprising to some, is that these issues are universal. They crop up to perhaps slightly different degrees, but this issue of turnover in different job roles in retail automotive, it's the same. You got that same problem in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in
Everywhere.
Canada, in the UK, in Australia, and in the USA, and this is and we've been attacking the problem in those different markets, and we've done the work on it. So it's not a flash in the pan problem. No one yet has really been able to nail that turnover issue. So when we started the conversation with a dealer, it's really, well, so you might not use the words "where are you hurting," but really you're trying to find out, based on where you are today and where you're going, where's the gap between that you want to do better at? Do you want to put a plug in some of that turnover? Do you want to hire higher performing F&I people? Do you want better service riders? Do you want to broaden the talent pond that you're fishing in for new techs? Because if you are, and you're looking for techs, and you're talking to high school kids that may be wanting to go into a trade or willing to consider a trade, and they're 16, 17, how do you figure out whether a 16 or 17-year-old's fitted for a trade as an automotive technician when they've got no work history whatsoever? Well, we know how to do that, because based on breaking down the 60, 70, 80, 100 different traits of what makes a great technician and optimizes their hours turned, you can codify that. You can skinny that down into a process, and ask 16, 17-year-olds or guys and girls in tire stores to complete that process, and they can complete that in 15 to 20 minutes, and it'll tell you how they're actually going to perform in that job role. And if you're hiring, techs as apprentices, and you're going to invest 2 or 3, 4 years in them, wouldn't you want to optimize that investment by making sure you're taking on apprentices with the greatest chance of actually performing well if you put that investment into them? And so it's not just, I think, about trying to find additional techs that you can hire, but also being smarter about thinking about, well, are there other ponds that I can fish in for finding my technician talent that I can nurture? And how do I better identify who are the right people, the right fish in those ponds that I really need to be hiring and putting our investment into, if that makes sense?
No, it makes total sense. Let me get to Terry Torline. Brett, very insightful. Thank you for sharing. This makes me think that I don't fish anymore, but a lot of people fish, and I used to fish. And it's the difference between just taking the boat out for the afternoon and throwing the line in the water, or using a fish finder and going where the fish are, and then dropping the line. Now, you could take this and you can craft a campaign, if you will, where you're going after specific talent. And you can craft that campaign to solicit that talent and then fine tune. I mean, we're talking doing stuff early in advance, maybe even before you fully need them. But if you have a vision as to where you want to take your company, and you have a vision as to what that team looks like and what those results look like further down the road, well, you can start sharpening your axe now, put a plan in place, and actually go after those people for tomorrow today. Wow.
Yeah. And it can be very surgical. And I mean that in a very targeted, focused, rather than spray and pray. And let's hope we hit some fish.
And let's face it, a lot of it's been spray and pray. You have a pulse, you're in. Come on in. There's your desk. Paul Machine, people are people. Wait, is that a 1980s song? Precise data can lead to find those that fit. Quid pro quo, isn't that profiling? Ah, this is great software.
So this is really about dealer groups have a wealth of data that they're not using at all today. They have hundreds, sometimes thousands of employees. Each of those employees, and if you took 100 or 1,000 top salespeople, top service writers, top technicians, and you analyze their makeup at scale. A bit like this, Paul, if you jump over to the that particular tab.
Yeah, let me bring that up on the screen.
So that show, and we've got that up now.
Yep, perfect.
So here, for example, we got a service advisor, and in this particular service advisor, we've measured a whole raft of, and what you're seeing on screen here are actually just the summary. We measure 70 to 80 different attributes in a particular job role, like a service advisor, technician, sales consultant, and so on. And each of these, this is a live platform. It's a demo platform, but it's a live platform, exactly what our customers use. And we're measuring hardiness, and we're measuring resilience, and and humor and playfulness, and interestingly enough, funnily, customers, I mean automotive store customers, actually like to deal with people who make buying fun, and so interestingly, there's a correlation between playfulness and humor in sales consultants and service advisors, and the performance that they achieve. Go figure. Who would have thought?
Hold on, let me jump in there to that comment. You are 100% right about making it fun. Now, when I sold cars, okay, my thing was buy from Paul. I had a little label maker that printed little stickers, and they'll tell you, go to Lexus of Westport, you might still find them today. I put hundreds of little stickers that said buy from Paul everywhere. Customers would sit at my desk, and I would follow their eyes, and they're looking at all of the stickers placed everywhere. But when I knew I had them, so I had a stamp, an ink stamp, and I stamped on the top of my head, buy from Paul, so that as I was doing the paperwork, the moment that I looked down to write, I would hear them start laughing. And at that point, gotcha, because they were laughing at the buy from Paul stamp on the top of my head. So there are so many predictors that will determine, and humor is definitely one of them. So go on. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to get that in there.
It's a good story, Paul. Yeah, so this is an example of some of the attributes that play into performance. And this is not like a high school test or a profile or an assessment. This is actually measuring a truckload of different research validated traits of people in a particular cohort, like service advisors or techs, and then pairing that with their performance numbers, like the hours turned or their dollars and hours per repair order, as we've got here for this particular service advisor, and then just running some maths. I'm making it sound simple because we keep all of that complexity hidden from customers. They don't want to deal with all of that. They just want to tell me, is this someone I should be hiring? And if it is, I'll get them in here, today, and get them started, because great talent's hard to find. So
wait a minute. So you could craft an ad then, let's say, looking for those specific traits that tied to specific performance.
Yes, that's the key.
I mean, who does that? Anybody out there in the audience? Have you heard of doing that? I've never heard of doing that. Wow.
This was the approach that we decided to take was, we would go in to work with a dealer and their data on the basis that look, we've learned a lot, but we don't go in assuming we know all the answers. What we go in to do is to start a fast discovery process by taking a dealer's cohort in a particular job role and pairing that with their performance numbers and surfacing, and then finding out for that dealer in their culture, in their business, in their brands, what predicts performance, and then codifying that into, you know, a fingerprint like this, and that way they can use it on any inbound candidate stream, and they can use it in multiple combinations. So you can actually figure out whether someone's best suited for this job role or that job role or this one, all in the same candidate, all in a heartbeat. So, and as soon as the candidate finishes the process, they get a little mini report. So they get some feedback. It doesn't tell them how they're going to perform, doesn't say they're going to be good or whatever. It just gives them some immediate feedback, which often they don't get anything. But the employer, the recruiter, the hiring manager, the sales manager, the service manager, the fixed ops director, etc., gets instant feedback as to how Cindy or Brad or Paul is going to perform as a service writer or as a tech or as a workshop manager and so on. And it's by breaking that down into really, and it's the forensic detail that is the key behind what we do, that really allow, because, hey, we're pretty complex. People are complex. And so we had to work, do a lot of that early work to surface these different research validated traits and then be able to measure them in a group of people, 50, 100, 400, 1,000 at a time, and figure out which ones of them are important for this particular job role, for this particular dealer group.
Now, you're right. Dealerships around the world are not that different when it comes to people and performance and situations that they undergo. I was in Aruba recently, had great conversations with the dealer, and some of the exact same things that we experience is what they experience. So by having a business that literally is global, as you said, you guys are around the world.
Yep.
You can get data from so many people and fine tune it. Now, do you then fine tune it further with the data from the dealership's own store, or is there sufficient data that the variance isn't going to be that great? Kind of explain that difference to me.
Yes. Occasionally we're dealing with a group of stores. There might only be 2 or 3 stores, and they don't have sufficient people and sufficient data to be able to build this custom for themselves. But if they've got 10 stores, 8 stores, 50 stores, then they've definitely got the data, and they should definitely do it in a custom way, because there are distinct differences. If I ask most people in across the USA, do you think that it takes the same type of individual to sell well in, say, the northeast of the USA as it does on the West Coast versus in the Midwest? Does it take the same type of salesperson? Is exactly the same person going to be successful in those different locations? Most people will generally tell you they think there would probably be a difference. They couldn't tell you what that different, right? They couldn't tell you what the difference is, but their instinct tells them there's going to be a difference. Well, our research tells us there is a difference. So when we took literally hundreds of different highline sales consultants from Malaysia and Australia and the US and Singapore, across brands such as Mercedes-Benz and BMW and other, and actually did this exercise, we found quite a large difference, because in each of the locations there's also subtle differences in the job, not just in the dealership but in the job in different markets. Right. In some markets, the sales consultants expect to find their own leads. They get no leads given to them whatsoever, so they have a lower quota in terms of vehicles per month. I know there's probably a lot of general managers and dealer principals and GSMs out there saying, wow, that sounds like a good idea. I'd like to have some of my guys actually go find their own leads.
You mean prospecting?
Yeah, they have to prospect, right?
Come on, Brett. What are you getting at here?
That's a lost art, right?
That's not in the sales job.
So, but my point being, it's different. Each location is different, and each job is different, and it's each job puts different, cognitive and emotional demands on a person, and they've either got that, unique and complex combination of attributes that's going to help them perform, or they don't. And if they don't, they're a liability. And by liability, I mean they're the wrong person for the job. You hire them, they're going to fail, you're going to fail. It's going to cost you a lot of money, mostly an opportunity cost.
Right.
And
That's the cost that people don't measure.
Yep. And it's hard to measure. Well, actually, it's not that hard, frankly. We do it all the time. And when we start to look at the numbers, it's a lot of gross that goes out there, that leaks out. But you can quantify this stuff. And for every one person that turns over, it's costing a lot. Even if you're paying them a straight variable comp, it's still costing you.
It's twofold. It's the turnover cost, but it's also the cost of having somebody sit there that just isn't cut out for it, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you about an experience. So I'm in the market for a car now, and I'm in the business. So I'm totally hip with how this stuff works. And without mentioning any names, there are different calibers of salespeople today. Now, when I was selling cars, there are customers today that call me from decades ago that have my cell phone number from then. I made a promise to them. I said, if you ever need me for anything, I will help you to the best of my ability. Hold on to my number and save it. Whether or not I'm here doesn't make any difference. You've entrusted me with your money. I'm going to make that promise to you. And people still call me decades later. Now, there's one particular store, and I'm talking to a couple of stores. There's one particular store that I'm dealing with. I don't have the guy's cell phone number. He doesn't give it out. I'm thinking, this is 2022. You're a business within a business. And I don't know about you, but it's never a bad time to talk about a car deal. I mean, I would wake up in the middle of the night when the phone went off. I would respond to emails and go back to sleep. I would have a clipboard on the passenger seat of my car, and I would take deposits on my drive home with the clipboard being on the steering wheel, one hand holding the clipboard and the steering wheel, the other one holding the pen to take the credit card information. But it's a different world. So I said to the manager, I said, I tried to call this guy. Your phone system leaves a bit to be desired. So I gave up on the phone. I just showed up. I tried to call the guy. Apparently, that's not his cell phone number. That's the store number. That tells me that, hey, you know what? I work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and I don't really care about anything beyond that. I don't know. That might not be a guy that I want to have on my team.
Yeah.
You didn't hear it from me.
And it, in some ways, you could say it's a new world, but it actually isn't. It's the same. It's the same world that we had 20. But the tools have changed, and the demands have changed, and the speed has changed. So there have been some changes, but the traits and the attributes and the personality and that combination of that psychological DNA that made you good at what you do and makes you took 1,000 sales consultants, top performing sales consultants, and we analyzed them. Guess what we'd find? They're all utterly different. Some are fast and slow and extroverted and this, and some like to tell stories, and some are, hard to get 2 words out of. They're all different. And one of the risks of saying that this business is, of selling motor vehicles is not rocket science, is it can trivialize those professionals that do a terrific job, because whilst it doesn't require, higher IQ, actually, interestingly, doesn't come into this. But what each of those individuals have is they have this set of traits that in combination make them good at what they do. And to that extent, it kind of is rocket science, because they make it, as the saying goes, pros make it look easy. And they do, because they've got that combination of attributes that make them good at what they do. And that's the secret sauce that we are peeling back, the covers on and understanding, so that employers can benefit from it, and candidates and employees can benefit from it as well. So I think for us particularly, it's an exciting field to work in. We're making new discoveries. This is new proprietary research in a way, but we don't leave it at that. What we need to do is hey, dealers got a business to run, and we're going to make this as practical, quick, fast, and what they want to know is will they perform and stick around, and that's the nub that we got to get to real quickly with clients that want that.
Want to get a couple of comments. Robert Allen Carvel, my advisors give rubber ducks to Jeep customers. After the Jeep's customers got ducked, they go to social media and tell where they got the duck from. That's part of making it fun. Oh, I love that.
Yep.
Matter of fact, I was at a Yelp event. I'm a Yelp elite team, an elite Yelper. So when you do a certain amount of reviews and things like that, you get invited to their elite squad, and they have all these different tasting parties and fun things that you do that cost you absolutely nothing, because they want your feedback from the different restaurants, bars, things like that. And the other night, the duck thing reminded me there was one particular bar where their signature drink had a little rubber duck in it, and that's why people go there. So that's kind of fun. Paul Machine says, prospecting, what? You mean I have to work to find my opportunities? Oh man, the best test of any salesperson is take somebody that's selling cars now that only got into the business within the last 3 years. Okay, take that person, pluck them right out of that job, walk them into a B2B technology company, put them in a car, and send them down the road to sell your software. And let's see how they do. It'll be a rude awakening. Yes, prospecting is quite a different thing that a lot of people do not understand. Paul said, my last four of my cell is 1, 2, 3, 4. I get those calls today, decades later, and I refer them to my friends, and I F you on the experience. Mike Fisher, put chum in the water, see shark shows, and interested people will come to the surface. Use Brett's algorithm to measure what people have surfaced, then go fishing. Why? Because you have the fish you want. That's really brilliant stuff.
Thank you. It's as we work, the more we learn, the more we uncover, the more it shows up the differences in people, and in fact, how whilst there's a myriad of differences between different people, different job roles, different parts of the planet, people in some ways are predictable, and you can see that when you study where they've been, what they've done, what they've produced.
Human behavior.
Yep, you put some maths around that, hey, and you find out that, if it's got these particular indicators, and what's interesting is most importantly, it's the results that we're achieving. When you look at the results that we're achieving, we're getting between on the first model build that we will build with the dealer group, we're getting 15 to 20% difference between actual observed performance and predicted performance pre-hire. And that's straight out of the gate, and then as we continue to iterate.
15% improvement.
Now a 15% difference. So if we predict that someone will do 180 vehicles before you hire them, when they come in, they're going to perform somewhere between, about 160 and 200. They're going to perform in that particular.
Just within the range.
It's in that range, and as we continue to iterate the system, and it's never set and forget. It gets smarter, it gets more accurate, and more predictive.
So artificial intelligence is at work here.
Kind of, but we're what we call a white box. Everything we do is transparent, provable, and explainable. There's nothing in what we do that you can't go from A to Z and explain to anyone exactly how you do what you do. How did you build it? How does it work? How does it predict vehicles, dollars per repair order, hours turned in a tech, and so on.
How often does this update or evolve?
It's a little bit up to the client. Some like it more often than not. It can be somewhere in that 12 to 24 months range. Once you start using the system and you start bringing in new people, you start to up the performance level of your whole bench right across every job role. So 12, 18 months, 2 years later, you say, let's rerun this. And in that process, you bring in a new bunch of performance data from the last 2 years, 18 months, and you rerun your model. And you see, and in some cases, particularly if there've been changes in processes, and particularly people, but processes and other things, you'll see a change in the model because that's how it evolves. You also pick up some things that you maybe didn't detect the first time through. So we've had circumstances with a global company. They had a dramatic change to their sales process from one measurement to 18 months later, and 70% of their process changed.
Wow. So then it has to change.
It does change. That was a rather dramatic example, and I use it because it is a dramatic example.
Well, I can tell you this. I've been to a lot of dealerships across the country, and there's not one I've run into that's going to change that much. Believe me on that one.
Not in automotive. That's a much more stable environment. Products are evolving, but most processes and so on are not changing to that degree. This particular client was a global B2B software company, and they had a dramatic change in sales process. And that therefore put different demands on the sales team of 300. And as a result, what was predicting performance in that particular job role needed to adapt to the new process that the sales reps in that case needed to perform to.
Paul Machine says, I love it. He has the secret sauce. It's the truth and what, Paul?
Left him hanging. He left you hanging.
You left me with a cliffhanger, Paul. Paul's my good friend.
And one of the Marty's on the call, I think you mentioned his name before. He was with a BMW store, and we did this process when I first met him some years back, and he was quite amazed at how accurate it was. If he's there, he might make a comment, but he was amazed just and all all the clients are. You talk to Chris Martinez at the Jackie Cooper Group in Tulsa. He's the platform director there. He'll tell you that what he loves about the partnership that Perception Predicts brings is it allows them to strip all the noise out of the hiring process, because there's so much noise and bias that goes into figuring out, is Brett the right person, is Paul the right person and for this job role, and of course sometimes some of these candidates, they do a good job seducing us. And we're the best sale they ever make. Sometimes we're the only sale they ever make. So we cut through that noise, and for in Chris's own words, he said, what you've helped us do is really identify the talent that can win in our culture, in our business.
You can be more selective. You can pass on the ones that are going to be liabilities, because the liability is not just a dud employee. It's somebody that can expose you legally.
Yes.
And that can be countless amounts of money.
In fact, Paul, what clients find and tell us is that probably the most important initial piece is actually stop hiring liabilities. Yes, you're going to get some gems and some superstars and some high performers and some good, steady medium producers who rain, hail, or shine. They turn up, they do the job, and they're good, and they're valued people and employees. But the most important benefit straight out of the gate is stop hiring people who complicate your business, who give you headaches, who create customer problems, who cost you money, and they churn out in 3, 6, 9 months later, and they frustrate the hell out of our managers. And we can stop that, and you can stop it in a heartbeat. Now, not a game of perfect. You'll still get the odd one.
Sure.
But you're gonna take a quantum leap in improving the quality of the bench that you're bringing in to the team.
I love it. It's the proverbial crystal ball today. It's been around for 3 years, but we've got a long way to go, and it sounds like this thing is just getting better. The more it gets used, it's like a sauce. It's better the next day.
Marinates.
It marinates. So Brett, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing Perception Predict, some really, really cool technology. For anybody that's not connected with Brett, please reach out and connect. We always remember what we forgot to ask when we had the opportunity to do so. The beauty of the internet is that it lives on forever, way beyond our lifetimes. So if anything sparked interest, reach out, connect with Brett. It's a phone call to find out whether or not you have everything covered, or might there be some room for improvement. And if there is, hey, the better as I said at the beginning, the better we all get, the better the customer experience. So I wish you all a safe and productive next week. Brett, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next week on Sunday Night Live. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.
Brett, don't go away after the show.